The scent of burning sage and pine needles filled the ceremonial grounds, thick and heady in the warm summer night. Dozens of torches lined the perimeter of the ancient stone circle, their flames dancing wildly with each gust of wind that swept through the forest. I stood at the edge of the gathering, half hidden behind an old oak tree, watching as members of the Silvercrest pack moved about in their finest ceremonial garments, flowing dresses in earthy tones for the women, leather vests and ceremonial paint for the men. The annual mating ceremony was the most sacred event in our calendar, a night when potential mates were presented before the Alpha and his council, when futures were decided and bonds were formed that would last lifetimes. And I wasn't supposed to be there at all. "Lyra, stop hiding and come help with these herbs," my Aunt Marin hissed, her eyes darting nervously toward the center of the circle, where Elder Thorn was arranging ceremonial objects on a stone altar. I reluctantly stepped out from behind the tree, tugging self-consciously at the simple brown dress I wore. Unlike the other women my age, whose dresses were adorned with intricate beadwork or embroidery that showcased their talents, mine was plain and slightly too large, borrowed from my cousin who had participated in last year's ceremony and was now happily mated. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered, taking the bundle of dried herbs from Aunt Marin's weathered hands. "Everyone knows I'm not eligible." My aunt's expression softened slightly. "You're 22, Lyra. All unmated females your age must attend. It's pack law." Pack law. The words that had governed my entire existence. The words that had marked me as different from the day I was born. In a community where strength and power were everything, I was the anomaly. The wolf who couldn't shift properly, whose transformation was incomplete and painful, leaving me somewhere between human and wolf, belonging fully to neither world. "They only want me here to serve," I said quietly, arranging the herbs as I'd been taught, crushing some between my fingers to release their aromatic oils. "No one expects the Alpha to choose a defective wolf as a potential mate." Aunt Marin's hand came down hard on my wrist, her nails digging into my skin. "Never say that word," she hissed. "Your mother would have—" "My mother isn't here," I cut in, immediately regretting the pain that flashed across her face. My mother, her sister, had died protecting me during a rogue wolf attack when I was 7. The memory I carried of her was fading but precious, her hands brushing through my hair as she told me that someday I would find my place in the pack. That someday, my difference would be my strength. Around my neck hung the only physical reminder of her I had left. A small silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon, worn smooth from 15 years of my fingers worrying over its surface. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I just don't see the point of pretending I have any chance tonight." Before she could respond, a hush fell over the gathering. Alpha Thorn had emerged from his lodge and was making his way toward the center of the ceremonial grounds. Even from a distance, his presence was overwhelming. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just past his shoulders, and a face that seemed carved from stone. At 35, he had led our pack for nearly a decade, after his father's unexpected death had thrust him into power before his time. Unlike his father, who had been mated since youth, Nathaniel Thorne had never chosen a mate. Year after year, the most beautiful and talented women in our pack and from neighboring territories had been presented to him, and year after year, he had declined them all. Some said he was waiting for the perfect political alliance. Others whispered that he was incapable of love after witnessing his parents' loveless union. Whatever the reason, his continued solitude had become a source of concern among the elders, who worried about the succession of pack leadership. "It's starting," Aunt Marin whispered, nudging me toward the back of the gathering. "Stay here and keep your head down. Help with the ceremonial wine when called, and then we can leave early." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. As she moved away to take her place with the other members of the council, I shrank further into the shadows, watching as the ceremony began. Elder Vargas, our pack's spiritual leader, raised her gnarled hands toward the full moon above us. "On this sacred night, when the moon blesses us with her fullest light, we gather to honor the ancient traditions of our kind," her voice rang out, surprisingly strong for her advanced age. "Tonight, we present our finest daughters, that our Alpha might find among them a worthy mate, a Luna to stand beside him and strengthen our pack." One by one, the eligible women stepped forward, 7 of them this year, each more beautiful than the last. I recognized most of them. Serena, daughter of our head warrior, whose golden hair gleamed in the firelight. Twins Daria and Lena, known for their musical talents and sweet dispositions. Elena, whose family were the pack's most skilled healers. 2 others came from neighboring friendly packs, political alliances that would strengthen our territory's boundaries. And then there was Kira. My throat tightened as she stepped into the light. Tall and graceful, with raven hair that fell in waves down her back, and eyes the color of amber, she was the unanimous favorite to be chosen. Not only was she physically stunning, but she was also one of our strongest fighters, had the purest shift form, and came from a bloodline nearly as prestigious as the Alpha's own. We had grown up together, and for a brief time in childhood had been inseparable, until she realized that befriending the pack's weakest link would do nothing for her status. The last time we had spoken, 3 years ago, she had made it clear what she thought of me. "You're a burden to the pack, Lyra. Everyone knows it. They only keep you out of respect for your mother's sacrifice." Her words had cut deeper than any physical wound, perhaps because they echoed my own darkest thoughts. I was so lost in the memory that I didn't notice Elder Vargas gesturing for the ceremonial wine, until Aunt Marin appeared suddenly at my side, giving me a sharp nudge. "The wine! Lyra, now!" Flushing with embarrassment, I hurried to the stone table where the ceremonial goblets had been arranged. 7 of them, 1 for each potential mate. My job was simple. Fill each goblet with the sacred wine, a mixture of fermented berries and herbs that was said to reveal one's true nature to the Alpha as he considered each candidate. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the heavy pitcher, painfully aware of the eyes that had turned to watch me. I could hear the whispers, feel the mixture of pity and disdain in their gazes. The broken wolf, the one who can't shift properly. Poor thing. I gritted my teeth and focused on my task, carefully filling each goblet without spilling a drop. This, at least, I could do correctly. As I reached the final goblet, Kira's, I felt rather than saw her approach the table. She stood close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and expensive. "Try not to embarrass yourself tonight, Lyra," she whispered, her voice sweet poison. "Or better yet, disappear after you're done serving. No one expects you to stay for the whole ceremony anyway." I kept my eyes downcast, focusing on pouring the wine perfectly to the ceremonial line marked on the goblet. "I'm just doing what's required of me," I replied quietly. She laughed softly, "As if you could ever do anything more." With a final contemptuous glance, she took her goblet and walked away, her hips swaying gracefully as she rejoined the line of potential mates. I set down the pitcher, my chest tight with a familiar ache. Part of me wanted to flee into the forest, to find some quiet place where I could lick my wounds in private. But something held me in place, perhaps my mother's pendant, suddenly warm against my skin, or perhaps the stubborn kernel of pride that refused to let Kira see how deeply her words had wounded me. The next phase of the ceremony began, with each woman stepping forward to present herself to Alpha Thorn. One by one, they approached his massive ceremonial chair, offering their goblets and speaking the ritual words that expressed their willingness to be considered as his mate. He would take a sip from each goblet, his expression revealing nothing as he considered them. I watched, mesmerized despite myself, as the ritual unfolded. There was something hypnotic about the Alpha's presence, something that drew the eye and commanded attention even when he was perfectly still. Unlike his father, who had ruled through fear and intimidation, Nathaniel Thorne led with a quiet intensity that somehow seemed more powerful. I had never spoken to him directly. Why would the Alpha ever have reason to address the pack's weakest member? But I had observed him from afar, watching how he mediated disputes, how he pushed the strongest warriors to their limits, while still finding time to listen to the concerns of even the lowest-ranked pack members, everyone except me. When Kira's turn came, a hush fell over the gathering. She approached the Alpha with perfect grace, her head held high, confidence radiating from every movement. Even from where I stood, I could see the appreciative gleam in the eyes of the council members who flanked Alpha Thorne's chair. She was the perfect choice. Everyone knew it. "My Alpha," she said, her voice clear and strong as she offered her goblet. "I come before you under the blessed full moon, offering myself as your potential mate. My strength would be your strength, my loyalty unwavering, my body ready to bear the next generation of Silvercrest leaders. Nathaniel Thorne's expression remained impassive as he accepted the goblet from her hands, their fingers brushing briefly. He took a longer sip than he had with the others, his dark eyes never leaving Kira's face. When he handed the goblet back, the slightest smile touched his lips, the first reaction he had shown all evening. My heart sank. It was decided then. After all these years of refusing to choose, he had finally found someone worthy. Part of me was relieved. With the ceremony essentially concluded, I could slip away unnoticed. I began to back toward the edge of the clearing, already planning my escape route through the trees. And then it happened. A sudden commotion at the entrance to the ceremonial grounds drew everyone's attention. 2 warriors burst through the crowd, supporting between them the bloodied form of a third. I recognized them instantly, Border Patrol guards who should have been watching our eastern territory. "Alpha!" one called out, his voice tight with urgency. "We were ambushed. The Blackclaw pack has crossed the boundary line. There are at least 20 of them, moving fast toward our main settlement." Alpha Thorne was on his feet in an instant, his powerful frame suddenly tense with alert energy. "How far?" "An hour, maybe less. They killed Thomas." The warrior gestured to their fallen comrade, whose body now lay motionless on the ground. The ceremonial grounds erupted into chaos. The Blackclaw pack had been our enemies for generations, a cruel and ambitious group that had been slowly encroaching on our territory for years. An attack during the mating ceremony, when our defenses were lowered and our attention diverted, was a strategic move I should have anticipated from them. "Warriors to me," Alpha Thorne's voice cut through the panic, instantly commanding attention. "Council members, organize the evacuation of children and elders to the safe caves. Everyone else, prepare to defend the settlement." As the pack scattered to follow his orders, I stood frozen, uncertain what to do. I wasn't a warrior. I couldn't fight. I wasn't an elder or council member. I had no authority to organize others. In moments of crisis like this, my uselessness to the pack became painfully apparent. Aunt Marin appeared at my side, gripping my arm tightly. "Go to the healing den and prepare supplies," she ordered. "At least you can help with the wounded when they return." I nodded gratefully, relieved to have a purpose, and turned to run toward the healing den at the edge of our settlement. But before I could take more than a few steps, Alpha Thorne's voice rang out again, stopping me in my tracks. "Wait." For one heart-stopping moment, I thought he was addressing me, but when I turned, I saw his eyes were fixed on the council members who were already moving to evacuate the vulnerable pack members. "The ceremonial cave," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "It's closer than the safe caves and more defensible. Take them there instead." The ceremonial cave was indeed closer, a sacred space carved into the mountainside, where our most important rituals were performed during the winter months when the weather made outdoor ceremonies impossible. Its entrance was narrow, easily defended, and it contained supplies that could sustain the pack for several days if necessary. As everyone rushed to follow the Alpha's commands, I slipped away, hurrying toward the healing den as Aunt Marin had instructed. The paths through our settlement were chaos, wolves running in every direction, some already shifting into their animal forms, others gathering weapons or supplies. The sounds of children crying and elders calling out instructions filled the air, mingling with the distant howls that signaled the approaching enemy. I reached the healing den, a large, low-ceilinged lodge near the eastern edge of our territory, and pushed through the door. Inside, several of our pack's healers were already in motion, gathering herbs, bandages, and poultices in preparation for the wounded who would inevitably return from the battle. Lyra, Elena's mother, healer Tessa, acknowledged me with a brief nod. Unlike many in the pack, she had always treated me with a calm, professional courtesy. "Start preparing yarrow poultices for bleeding wounds. We'll need at least 20. I nodded and moved to the herb storage, grateful for the clear direction. My fingers worked quickly, grinding dried yarrow leaves and mixing them with honey and clean spring water to form a paste that would slow bleeding and prevent infection. I had always had a knack for healing work. Perhaps because I understood pain in a way that others didn't, having experienced the agony of incomplete shifts since childhood. As I worked, the sounds of battle grew closer. Snarls and howls echoed through the forest, punctuated by the more human sounds of shouted commands and cries of pain. My hands trembled slightly, but I forced myself to focus on my task. This, at least, was something I could do well. I had prepared nearly 15 poultices when the door to the healing den burst open. 2 warriors stumbled in, supporting a third between them whose leg was badly mangled. "Rogues flanked us from the north," one gasped, helping to lower his wounded companion onto a healing pallet. "They're trying to circle around to the settlement. The Alpha has ordered all non-fighters to the ceremonial cave immediately." Healer Tessa looked up from where she was setting a broken arm. "We can't move the wounded," she said firmly. "The Alpha said everyone," the warrior insisted. "He's sending a defensive line here to protect the den. You can continue treating patients here, but anyone who can move needs to get to the cave now." Tessa's eyes found mine across the room. "Lyra, take what poultices you've finished and go. We'll need them at the cave for the walking wounded who make it there." I hesitated, looking around at the already crowded healing den. "I could stay and help." "Go," she said, more gently this time. "You'll be more useful there, where there are fewer trained healers." Recognizing the truth in her words, I gathered the poultices I had prepared, wrapped them carefully in clean cloths, and placed them in a small leather satchel. As I slipped out the door, the night air hit me with the metallic scent of blood and the acrid smell of fear. The sounds of fighting seemed to come from all directions now, disorienting me. The ceremonial cave was on the western side of our territory, which meant I would need to circle around the main settlement to reach it. The most direct path would take me too close to the eastern border where the fighting had started. I took a deep breath, clutched my mother's pendant for courage, and plunged into the forest, taking a rarely used hunting trail that wound around the northern edge of our lands. The forest was eerily quiet here, the usual nighttime sounds of insects and nocturnal animals silenced by the disturbance of battle. I moved as quickly and quietly as I could, wincing each time a twig snapped beneath my feet. If only I could shift properly, I could move through these woods as silently as any wolf, but in my human form, I felt clumsy and exposed. I had covered perhaps half the distance to the ceremonial cave when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of movement in the underbrush ahead. I froze, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain it could be heard from miles away. Slowly, I crouched down, making myself as small and invisible as possible behind a fallen log. The sounds grew closer, not the careful movements of a pack member trying to remain undetected, but the confident strides of someone who didn't fear discovery. Through the gaps in the vegetation, I caught glimpses of dark fur. A shifted wolf, too large to be one of our younger members, moving with predatory intent. A Blackclaw scout, searching for stragglers like me. I held my breath, pressing myself against the damp earth, praying to the moon goddess that the wind wouldn't shift and carry my scent to him. The rogue wolf paused, his massive head lifting as he tested the air. For one terrible moment, I thought he had detected me, his head turned in my direction, eyes gleaming in the darkness. Then suddenly, a howl rose from the direction of our settlement. The Alpha's howl, commanding and powerful, calling all warriors to him. The rogue's head whipped toward the sound, and after a moment's hesitation, he changed direction, moving away from me and toward the heart of the battle. I waited until I could no longer hear him, before allowing myself to breathe again. My limbs were shaking with adrenaline and fear, but I forced myself to my feet. I needed to reach the ceremonial cave before I encountered any more enemies. Moving with more urgency now, I abandoned stealth for speed, half running through the forest. The terrain grew steeper as I approached the western mountains, the path narrowing as it wound upward toward the cave entrance. I could see torchlight ahead, pack members standing guard at the narrow opening that led into the mountain. "Lyra?" One of the guards, a young warrior named Wren, who had sometimes shown me kindness, looked surprised to see me. "We thought you might have been caught in the eastern sector." "I was at the healing den," I explained breathlessly, holding up my satchel. "Healer Tessa sent me with supplies." He nodded and stepped aside to let me pass. "Be careful in there. It's crowded and tensions are high." That was an understatement. As I stepped into the ceremonial cave, The noise hit me like a physical force. Children crying, elders arguing over the best defensive strategies, injured wolves moaning in pain. The massive cavern, which usually felt spacious during our winter ceremonies, now seemed cramped with nearly 100 pack members packed inside. I made my way toward a section where the wounded had been gathered, stepping carefully around huddled groups of frightened children and nervous parents. As I passed, I caught snippets of conversation, most centered around the Alpha and his decision to engage the Black Claw pack directly rather than retreat. He took 20 of our strongest warriors straight into their main force, someone was saying. It's suicide. No, it's strategy, another argued. He's drawing them away from the settlement while our flanking parties circle behind. I kept my head down, not wanting to draw attention to myself. Near the back of the cave, several injured wolves were being tended to by an elder with minimal healing training. I approached her, offering my satchel. I've brought yarrow poultices from the healing den, I said quietly. The elderly woman looked up, relief washing over her tired face. Thank the goddess. We have 3 with deep lacerations that won't stop bleeding. I knelt beside her, unwrapping the poultices and showing her how to apply them properly. As we worked, I lost track of time, focused entirely on easing pain and stopping blood flow. This was where I felt most useful. Not in ceremonies or pack gatherings, but in moments of practical need, where my steady hands and knowledge of healing could make a difference. I had just finished bandaging a young male's arm when a commotion at the cave entrance drew everyone's attention. Warriors were streaming in, many of them bloodied and limping, but their expressions were triumphant rather than defeated. The Black Claws are retreating, one called out. His announcement met with cheers and howls of relief. The Alpha led the counterattack himself. You should have seen him. He took down their second-in-command with a single strike to the throat. As the warriors continued to enter, I scanned their faces, looking for Aunt Marin or any others I knew well. There was no sign of her, but I recognized many of our pack's strongest fighters, most bearing injuries that would need treatment. And then he entered. Alpha Nathaniel Thorne, his massive frame filling the narrow cave entrance. Unlike the others, he was still in his shifted form, a huge black wolf with eyes that gleamed like amber in the torchlight. Blood matted his fur in several places, but he moved with the fluid grace of one who is not seriously injured. The cave fell silent as he padded forward, pack members parting to create a path for him. When he reached the center of the cavern, he shifted, the transformation so smooth and effortless that it seemed like nothing more than a ripple passing through water. One moment he was wolf, the next he was man, crouching naked on the stone floor. Someone quickly brought him clothing, which he pulled on with efficient movements before addressing the gathered pack. The immediate threat has been neutralized, he said, his deep voice echoing off the cave walls. The Black Claws have retreated across the border, but they will regroup. This was not a random attack. It was a calculated strike meant to coincide with our mating ceremony when they knew our defenses would be lowered. Murmurs of anger rippled through the crowd. We lost 4 of our own tonight, he continued, his expression grim. Tomas, Lyle, Sarah, and Damon gave their lives defending our territory. We will honor their sacrifice at dawn. For now, we must remain vigilant. The wounded will stay here in the ceremonial cave tonight, along with the children and elders. All able warriors will return with me to secure the perimeter. As he finished speaking, his gaze swept across the gathered pack members, and for a brief, heart-stopping moment, his eyes met mine. I quickly looked down, feeling the weight of his attention like a physical touch. When I dared to glance up again, he had already moved on, speaking quietly with his second-in-command. I returned to my work with the wounded, trying to ignore the strange flutter in my chest. It was nothing. A coincidence, a random moment of eye contact that meant nothing to him, even if it had sent my pulse racing. Alpha Thorne wouldn't even know my name. The night wore on, and the initial rush of activity gradually subsided into an uneasy quiet. Children fell asleep against their parents' shoulders. Warriors dozed sitting upright against the cave walls, and the wounded rested as comfortably as their injuries allowed. I continued to move among them, checking bandages, offering water, and applying fresh poultices where needed. I was exhausted, my limbs heavy with fatigue, but sleep felt impossible with so much responsibility resting on my shoulders. I was one of the few with any healing knowledge in the cave, and I couldn't allow myself to rest while others might need me. It was near dawn when I finally sat down, my back against the cool stone wall, allowing myself a moment's respite. My eyes burned from tiredness, and my hands were stained with blood and herbal remedies. I must have closed my eyes for just a moment, but the next thing I knew, I was startled awake by a presence beside me. I opened my eyes to find Alpha Thorn himself sitting next to me, his broad shoulder nearly touching mine. I stiffened, instantly alert despite my exhaustion. "Alpha," I stammered, starting to rise. It was disrespectful to remain seated in his presence. "Stay," he said quietly, his voice pitched low so as not to disturb those sleeping nearby. It wasn't a request, but a command, and I sank back down, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You're the one who can't shift properly," he said after a moment of silence. It wasn't a question, and there was no cruelty in his tone, just a simple statement of fact. Still, I felt my cheeks burn with shame. "Yes, Alpha," I whispered, staring at my blood-stained hands. To my surprise, he made a small sound that might have been a chuckle. "Yet you've treated more wounded tonight than any of our trained warriors. Healer Tessa told me to look for you when she arrived. Said you have the steadiest hands she's ever seen." I looked up in shock, unable to believe that Healer Tessa would have spoken of me to the Alpha, much less with praise. I just did what needed to be done." His amber eyes studied me with an intensity that made me want to squirm. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra," I said, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. "Lyra Blackwood." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps? Marin's niece. Elena Blackwood's daughter. I nodded, surprised that he knew of my connection to my mother. She had died so long ago, and had never been particularly high-ranking in the pack hierarchy. "Your mother saved my sister during the Northern Territory dispute," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "She was brave." "Thank you," I whispered, my fingers automatically finding my mother's pendant. His eyes tracked the movement, noting the silver crescent moon that gleamed dully in the low light of the cave. "You should rest," he said suddenly, rising to his feet in one fluid motion. "Dawn is approaching, and we'll need to move the wounded back to the settlement soon." Before I could respond, he was gone, moving through the cave with silent grace to check on others. I stared after him, my mind reeling from the brief interaction. The Alpha had spoken to me, had known who I was, had acknowledged my contribution. It was more recognition than I had received from anyone in the pack in years. Exhaustion suddenly crashed over me like a wave. My eyelids felt impossibly heavy, and the cool stone against my back seemed to be pulling me into its embrace. Just a few minutes of rest, I told myself. Just enough to gather my strength for the journey back to the settlement. I closed my eyes, and this time, sleep claimed me instantly. I dreamed of running through the forest on 4 legs, my wolf form strong and complete, my paws barely touching the ground as I raced beneath a full moon. There was no pain in the shift, no half-formed limbs or agonizing transition, just the pure joy of speed and strength that I had never known in my waking life. And running beside me, matching me stride for stride, was a massive black wolf with amber eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. I woke to the sensation of movement, of being carried. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or what had happened. The battle, the wounded, the ceremonial cave all seemed like distant memories. I was aware only of warmth surrounding me, of strong arms holding me against a broad chest, of a steady heartbeat beneath my ear. My eyes fluttered open, and I found myself looking up at the sharp line of Alpha Thorn's jaw, his profile outlined against the early morning sky. He was carrying me, one arm supporting my back, the other beneath my knees, as if I weighed nothing at all. I gasped softly, the sound causing him to glance down at me. Our eyes met, and something passed between us, something I couldn't name, but that sent a shiver of awareness through my entire body. "You're awake," he said, his voice a low rumble that I could feel vibrating through his chest. Yes, I stammered, mortified to find myself in such a position. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep. You can put me down. I can walk." But he didn't stop or loosen his hold. You treated wounded pack members for hours without rest, he said simply. Let others care for you now. I wanted to protest further, but the words died in my throat as I became aware of our surroundings. We were walking in a procession back to the settlement, surrounded by other pack members who were helping the wounded or carrying children who had fallen asleep, and they were all staring at us, at me, cradled in the Alpha's arms like something precious. I caught glimpses of their expressions as we passed. Shock, confusion, curiosity, and in some cases, open hostility. Near the front of the group, I saw Kira, her beautiful face twisted into a mask of disbelief and anger as she watched the Alpha carrying me. Alpha, please, I whispered urgently. People are staring. This isn't appropriate. A slight smile curved his mouth, though he kept his eyes forward. I decide what's appropriate in my pack. Lyra Blackwood. The way he said my name, with a weight and significance I couldn't understand, sent another shiver through me. I fell silent, too confused and exhausted to argue further. Instead, I allowed myself to relax against him, to absorb the warmth and strength of his body, to let my head rest against his shoulder. It had been so long since anyone had held me, had offered me comfort or protection. Even Aunt Marin, kind as she was, had never been demonstrative with her affection. As we neared the settlement, I could see the damage from the previous night's attack. Several lodges with walls torn open, blood staining the packed earth of the central gathering area, pack members moving solemnly as they began repairs or tended to the wounded who had remained at the healing den. Alpha Thorn carried me directly to my own small cabin at the edge of the settlement, a modest structure I shared with Aunt Marin. I was surprised he knew where I lived, but then again, he was Alpha. He probably knew every dwelling in the territory. Thank you, I said softly, as he set me down gently at my door, for carrying me. Though it wasn't necessary, his amber eyes studied me with that same intensity I had noted in the cave. Rest today, he said, ignoring my awkward gratitude. There will be a memorial service for our fallen at sunset, and then we will resume the mating ceremony. I blinked in surprise. Resume the ceremony? After everything that happened, a shadow passed over his face, especially after what happened. The Black Claws timed their attack to disrupt our most sacred tradition. To let them succeed would be to show weakness. Besides, he added, his voice taking on a different quality that I couldn't quite identify. I had not yet made my decision when we were interrupted. With that cryptic statement, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing bewildered at my door. I watched his retreating form, the broad shoulders, the confident stride, the way other pack members hastened to move out of his path, and felt a strange hollowness in my chest that I didn't want to examine too closely. Inside, the cabin was empty. Aunt Marin must have been helping with the cleanup or tending to council matters. I was grateful for the solitude as I stripped off my blood-stained dress and washed myself with water from the basin. Every muscle in my body ached with fatigue, and as soon as I had cleaned away the worst of the dirt and blood, I collapsed onto my small bed, not even bothering to put on fresh clothes. Sleep claimed me instantly, deep and dreamless this time. I woke to Aunt Marin shaking my shoulder, her expression a mixture of concern and something else. Excitement, anxiety, that I couldn't quite read. Lyra, wake up. The memorial service begins in an hour, and then the mating ceremony will resume. I sat up groggily, pushing hair from my face. Why are they continuing with the ceremony? Shouldn't we be focused on strengthening our defenses in case the Black Claws return? Aunt Marin gave me an odd look. The Alpha has decreed it, and his word is law. Besides, many believe that completing the ceremony and securing a Luna for the pack is exactly what we need to strengthen our position. She moved to our small wardrobe and began rummaging through it, pulling out garments and examining them with a critical eye. You need something better to wear than that old brown dress, she muttered, more to herself than to me. I frowned, watching her. Why? I'm not part of the ceremony anymore. I've fulfilled my serving duties. No one will be looking at me. She turned to me with an expression I couldn't interpret. Lyra, do you really not understand what happened this morning? What do you mean? I asked, a flutter of unease stirring in my stomach. She sat beside me on the bed, taking my hands in hers. The Alpha carried you, carried you through the entire pack. He could have woken you, or assigned a warrior to help you back, or left you to sleep in the cave until you woke naturally. Instead, he chose to carry you himself, in full view of everyone. I shook my head, not understanding the significance. He was just being kind because I helped with the wounded. Aunt Marin made a sound that was half laugh, half sigh. Oh, my sweet, naive girl. Nathaniel Thorne has never been known for public displays of kindness, especially not toward, she hesitated, toward defective wolves. I finished for her, the familiar bitterness creeping into my voice. That's not what I was going to say, she said sharply. Never toward individuals of lower rank. He maintains a careful distance from most pack members. It's how he commands respect. Yet this morning, he carried you as if you were precious to him. The words sent a shock through me, awakening feelings I had long suppressed. Hope, longing, a desperate desire to belong. I ruthlessly pushed them down again. You're reading too much into it, I said, pulling my hands from hers and standing up. He was just being practical. I was exhausted, and he needed everyone back at the settlement quickly. Aunt Marin looked like she wanted to argue further, but instead she just sighed and returned to the wardrobe. Regardless, you need to look presentable tonight. The entire pack will be watching. In the end, she produced a dress I had never seen before. A simple but elegant garment of deep green that she admitted she had been saving for a special occasion. It fit me better than the borrowed brown dress had, highlighting the slender curves of my body that were usually hidden beneath shapeless clothing. Your mother would be proud to see you in this, Aunt Marin said softly as she helped me with the ties at the back. You look so much like her. I touched my mother's pendant, which I had carefully cleaned and polished. Do you really think so? Yes, she said, her voice thick with emotion. She had the same quiet strength you do, the kind that isn't showy or aggressive, but endures when others would break. I blinked back sudden tears, turning to embrace her. Thank you for everything, Aunt Marin, for taking me in, for protecting me all these years. She held me tightly for a moment, then stepped back, composing herself. Come. We shouldn't be late. The memorial service was held in the central clearing of our settlement, where 4 pyres had been constructed for our fallen pack members. As Alpha Thorne spoke of their courage and sacrifice, I stood with the other lower-ranked pack members at the edges of the gathering, my eyes fixed on the flames that would carry our dead to the next world. I had known all 4 of the fallen, though not well. Tomas had once helped me carry firewood when he saw me struggling with a too heavy load. Sarah had been kind to everyone, including me. Lyle and Damon had been friendly enough, though distant. Their loss left a hollow ache in my chest. Not the sharp grief of those who had loved them deeply, but the dull pain of knowing that 4 lives had been cut short, 4 flames extinguished too soon. As the ceremony concluded and the pyres burned down to embers, there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Pack members began moving toward the ceremonial grounds where the mating ceremony would resume, their expressions a mixture of solemnity and anticipation. Despite the losses we had suffered, there was an undercurrent of excitement. Tonight, finally, Alpha Thorne would choose his mate. I hesitated, uncertain whether I should attend. My official duties had been completed the previous night, and I had no desire to watch Kira be chosen and elevated to the position of Luna. But Aunt Marin's hand on my elbow guided me firmly toward the gathering. You should be there, she said quietly. Trust me. The ceremonial grounds had been hastily repaired after the previous night's disruption. Fresh torches lined the stone circle, and the altar had been restored to its proper arrangement. The 7 potential mates stood in their places, though their ceremonial dresses now showed signs of the previous night's battle, a tear here, a stain there. Even Kira's perfect appearance was slightly diminished, her hair not quite as immaculate as it had been, dark circles visible beneath her eyes despite her attempts to conceal them. I took my place at the very back of the gathering, trying to make myself as inconspicuous as possible. The night air was cooler than it had been the previous evening, and I wrapped my arms around myself, grateful for the warmer fabric of the green dress. Elder Vargas stepped forward, her aged voice carrying surprisingly well across the hushed crowd. Last night, our sacred ceremony was interrupted by those who wished to see our pack weakened and divided. But we stand here now, united in our determination to honor our traditions and secure our future. The mating ceremony will continue, and our alpha will choose the Luna who will stand beside him and strengthen our bloodline. She turned to Alpha Thorn, who sat once again in his ceremonial chair, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the potential mates before him. Alpha Thorn, have you made your decision? A tense silence fell over the gathering. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the culmination of years of speculation and anticipation. I found myself holding my breath along with everyone else, my heart inexplicably racing. Alpha Thorn rose to his feet, his powerful presence drawing all eyes to him. I have, he said, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the ceremonial grounds. He moved forward, passing the line of potential mates without so much as glancing at them. Confusion rippled through the crowd as he continued walking, moving past the front rows of the gathering, his amber eyes scanning the faces before him as if searching for someone specific. And then, to my absolute horror, his gaze found mine. He began walking directly toward me, his expression intense and focused, oblivious to the shocked whispers that erupted around him. I froze, unable to believe what was happening. This couldn't be real. He couldn't possibly be approaching me. There must be someone standing near me, someone important I hadn't noticed. But there was no one. I stood alone at the very edge of the gathering, and Alpha Nathaniel Thorn was walking straight toward me with purpose in every step. He stopped before me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. The entire pack had fallen silent, watching in disbelief as the Alpha stood before the weakest member of their community. Lyra Blackwood, he said, his voice pitched for my ears alone, though I was certain that many of the shifted wolves in the gathering could hear him clearly. Your courage last night, your dedication to healing our wounded, your quiet strength in the face of danger, these are the qualities I seek in the one who would stand beside me as Luna. I stared at him, certain I had misunderstood. Alpha, I don't understand. A small smile curved his lips. I'm asking you to be my mate, Lyra. My Luna. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. This couldn't be happening. It was impossible, unthinkable. I, the broken wolf, the one who couldn't even shift properly, being asked to become Luna of the Silvercrest Pack. But I'm defective, I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. I can't shift completely. I would bear you weak children. The pack would never accept me. Something darkened in his eyes at my words. Never use that word to describe yourself again, he said, an edge of command in his voice. Your shifting ability has nothing to do with your worth or your strength. As for the pack, they will accept my choice or they will answer to me. From the corner of my eye, I could see Kira's face, contorted with rage and disbelief. Behind her, the other potential mates wore expressions ranging from shock to pity, clearly believing that I would refuse and spare everyone the embarrassment of having a Luna who couldn't properly transform. Why me? I asked, my voice barely audible. There are so many others more suitable, stronger, more beautiful, from better bloodlines. Alpha Thorn reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against the silver crescent moon pendant that hung at my throat. The touch sent a jolt of warmth through me that had nothing to do with the physical contact and everything to do with the intensity in his gaze. Because when everyone else was panicking, you were healing. When others sought safety, you risked your life to bring medicine to the wounded. Because despite years of being treated as less than, you have developed a compassion and strength that no one else in this pack possesses. His voice dropped even lower. And because from the moment I carried you in my arms this morning, I knew with absolute certainty that you were meant to be mine. The conviction in his voice, the unwavering certainty in his eyes, broke something open inside me, a small, fragile hope that I had never allowed myself to acknowledge. Could this be real? Could the Alpha truly want me, with all my flaws and limitations? I don't know what to say, I whispered truthfully. His lips curved into a smile that transformed his usually stern features into something breathtakingly beautiful. Say yes. Say you'll be my mate, my Luna. my partner in leading this pack toward a future where strength is measured not just in fighting ability or perfect shifts, but in compassion, intelligence, and courage. The ceremonial grounds remained deathly silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on us, hundreds of breaths held in anticipation of my answer. In that moment, I felt the weight of my mother's pendant against my skin, the symbol she had given me, telling me to remember that even in the darkest night, the moon's light would guide me home. Maybe this was what she had meant. Maybe this was the home I had been searching for all my life, not a place, but a person who saw me clearly and valued me exactly as I was. "Yes," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "Yes, I will be your mate, your Luna, your partner." A collective gasp rose from the gathered pack members, followed immediately by confused murmurs and whispers, but Alpha Thorn, Nathaniel, seemed oblivious to their reaction. His face broke into a genuine smile, transforming his features from intimidating to breathtakingly handsome. Before I could register what was happening, he had swept me into his arms, lifting me as easily as if I weighed nothing at all. One strong arm supported my back while the other cradled my legs, holding me against his chest in a mirror of how he had carried me that morning. "Alpha, what are you doing?" I gasped, acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes watching us. "Following tradition," he said, his amber eyes gleaming with something that looked suspiciously like mischief. "The Alpha always carries his chosen mate to the ceremonial chair to complete the ritual." As he turned and began walking back through the parted crowd, I caught glimpses of the expressions around us: shock, confusion, disapproval, and from a few, like Aunt Marin, tears of joy. Kira's face was a mask of cold fury, her eyes promising retribution. I tightened my arms around Nathaniel's neck, suddenly afraid not for myself, but for what my acceptance might mean for him, for his authority, for his standing with the pack. "They don't approve," I whispered against his ear. "This could weaken your position." His arms tightened around me. "Let me worry about that," he murmured. "For now, just be here with me, in this moment." As we reached the ceremonial chair, he sat with me still cradled in his arms, my body resting across his lap. Elder Vargas approached, her expression carefully neutral, though I could see the surprise in her eyes. She carried the ceremonial goblet, a different one from those used the previous night, larger and more ornately decorated with symbols of the moon and wolf. "Alpha Thorn has made his choice," she announced, her voice carrying across the now silent gathering. "As is our tradition, they will share the sacred wine, binding their spirits together under the blessing of the moon goddess." She held out the goblet, and Nathaniel took it with one hand, his other arm still supporting me on his lap. He took a sip first, as tradition dictated, then held the goblet to my lips. The wine was sweet and heavy on my tongue, warming me from the inside as it traveled down my throat. With this shared drink, the Alpha and his chosen Luna begin their bond, Elder Vargas intoned. "May the moon goddess bless their union and strengthen our pack through their leadership." I expected Nathaniel to set me aside then, to allow me to stand beside him as the ceremony concluded. Instead, he shifted me slightly in his arms, positioning me more comfortably against his chest, my head naturally coming to rest on his shoulder. The warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my ear, and the exhaustion of the past 24 hours suddenly overwhelmed me. My eyelids grew heavy, my limbs relaxing against him almost against my will. "Rest," he whispered, his lips brushing against my hair. "I have you." I fought against the encroaching drowsiness, mortified at the thought of falling asleep during such an important moment. "I can't sleep now," I murmured. "The whole pack is watching." "Let them watch," he said simply. "Let them see that their Alpha cherishes his Luna's comfort above ceremony and tradition." His words, spoken with such tender conviction, were the final push I needed to surrender to exhaustion. As Elder Vargas continued the ritual, blessing our union and calling upon the pack to accept their new Luna, my consciousness began to drift. The last thing I was aware of was Nathaniel's arms tightening protectively around me, his chin coming to rest gently on top of my head. And as I slipped into dreams, I heard the astonished whispers rippling through the crowd. She fell asleep, on the Alpha's shoulder, during the mating ceremony. Has this ever happened before? What does it mean? But louder than all of these was Nathaniel's voice, rumbling through his chest against my ear. It means she trusts me completely, and that, my pack, is the greatest gift a Luna can give her alpha. I woke slowly, consciousness returning in gentle waves. I was surrounded by warmth and the scent of pine and cedar, a masculine, comforting smell that I didn't recognize. The surface beneath me was soft, the coverings luxurious against my skin in a way my simple bedding had never been. For a moment, I kept my eyes closed, savoring the comfort and trying to gather my scattered memories, the mating ceremony, the attack, tending to the wounded, Alpha Thorn carrying me, his unexpected choice, falling asleep in his arms. My eyes flew open as reality crashed over me. I sat up abruptly, the soft furs falling away from my body as I took in my surroundings with growing bewilderment. I was in a large, beautifully appointed room that I had never seen before. Sunlight streamed through windows draped with heavy curtains of deep blue. The bed I lay in was massive, carved from dark wood with intricate wolf designs running along the headboard. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting pack history, and a fireplace crackled softly at the far end of the room, the Alpha's quarters. I was in the Alpha's private chambers. A soft sound drew my attention to a corner of the room where Nathaniel Thorne sat in a large chair, watching me with those intense amber eyes. He had changed from his ceremonial clothes into simpler attire, a black shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders and dark pants, but he looked no less powerful or commanding. "Good morning," he said, his deep voice sending an inexplicable shiver through me. Or rather, good afternoon. "You've slept nearly 20 hours. I stared at him in horror. 20 hours? I've been asleep in your bed for 20 hours? A slight smile curved his lips. "You needed the rest. After tending the wounded all night and then the stress of the ceremony, your body demanded recovery." I clutched the furs to my chest, suddenly aware that I was still wearing the green dress from the ceremony, though someone had removed my shoes. "I shouldn't be here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't proper. We haven't completed the mating bond," he finished for me, rising from his chair and approaching the bed with slow, measured steps. "No, we haven't. That's a choice we'll make together when you're ready." I swallowed hard, watching him move toward me with the fluid grace of a predator, not threatening, but undeniably powerful. "The pack must be scandalized," I said. "First you choose the defect," I caught myself, remembering his words from the ceremony. "First you choose me, then I fall asleep during the ceremony, and then I spend the night in your quarters without completing the bond." He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, but not so close as to crowd me. "The pack will adjust to many things in the coming days," he said, his tone making it clear that their opinions were of little concern to him, including the fact that their Alpha and Luna are rewriting some of the more outdated traditions. "Luna," I echoed, the title feeling foreign and impossible on my tongue. "I still don't understand why you chose me. There must be political consequences to selecting someone like me instead of Kira or one of the others." Something darkened in his expression. "Someone like you," he repeated, the words carrying a weight of sadness that surprised me. "Lyra, do you really not see your own worth?" I looked down at my hands, unable to meet his penetrating gaze. "I know what I am, what I've always been to this pack. The broken one. The one who can't shift properly. The burden they keep out of respect for my mother's sacrifice." His hand came up to cup my cheek, gentle but insistent, as he tilted my face up to meet his eyes. The touch sent a jolt of warmth through me that had nothing to do with physical heat. "Is that truly how you see yourself?" he asked softly. "Because it's not at all how I see you." "How can you see me any differently?" I whispered. "You know my limitations better than anyone." He shook his head slowly. "What I know is that when our pack was under attack, when others were running for safety or fighting on the front lines, you were moving through dangerous territory alone to bring healing supplies to those who needed them. What I know is that you worked tirelessly through the night, tending to the wounded with more skill and compassion than any of our trained warriors. What I know is that you've endured years of dismissal and isolation, without becoming bitter or cruel." His thumb brushed softly across my cheekbone, wiping away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Your inability to shift fully isn't a defect, Lyra. It's simply one aspect of who you are. And it has nothing to do with your worth as a wolf, as a healer, or as my chosen Luna. I wanted desperately to believe him, to accept the vision of myself that he was offering. But years of conditioning couldn't be undone in a single conversation. The pack will never accept me, I said, especially not after I fell asleep during the ceremony. They'll see it as disrespectful, as proof that I'm not worthy. To my surprise, Nathaniel chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. Actually, many in the pack saw it differently. They saw a Luna who felt so safe with her alpha that she could surrender completely to his protection, even in a public setting. There's power in that kind of trust, Lyra. Really? I asked, skepticism clear in my voice. Really, he confirmed. Though I won't pretend there aren't those who disapprove of my choice. Kira and her supporters primarily. But they'll come around, or they'll find themselves looking for a new pack. The casual confidence with which he issued what was essentially a threat should have alarmed me. Instead, I felt a strange flutter in my chest at the knowledge that he would protect me so fiercely. Why me? I asked again, needing to understand. Out of all the women you could have chosen, women who would have brought political advantages, women with perfect shifts and strong bloodlines, why choose the pack's greatest liability? Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes studying me with an intensity that made me want to look away, though I forced myself to meet his gaze. I've watched you for years, he finally said, his voice low and intimate. At first, it was because of your mother. Elena saved my sister's life during the Northern Territory dispute, and I felt I owed it to her memory to ensure her daughter was treated fairly. But the more I observed you, the more I saw someone extraordinary. I blinked in surprise. The Alpha, the man who barely acknowledged most pack members, had been watching me for years? It seemed impossible. I saw how you helped the elders with their daily tasks without being asked. He continued. I saw how you taught the pups to identify healing herbs in the forest, even when their parents pulled them away from you. I saw how you took the worst duties without complaint, how you endured the whispers and stares with dignity. His hand moved from my cheek to brush a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture achingly tender. And I saw how, despite everything, you remained kind. Not broken, not bitter, but kind. That's a rare quality, Lyra. Rarer and more valuable than any perfect shift or political connection. I swallowed hard, his words threatening to unravel the protective shell I had built around myself over the years. You never spoke to me, I said, unable to keep the hint of accusation from my voice. If you saw all of that, why did you never once acknowledge me? A shadow passed over his face, something like regret darkening his features. Because I am Alpha, and my attention changes things. Had I singled you out for special treatment, it would have made your position in the pack even more difficult. I had to wait for the right moment, a moment when I could not only acknowledge you, but elevate you to your rightful place beside me. The mating ceremony, I said, understanding dawning. He nodded. I had planned to choose you all along. When the Black Claws attacked, I feared I had lost my chance. But then, seeing you in the cave, tending to the wounded with such quiet competence, it only confirmed what I already knew in my heart. And what was that? I whispered. His eyes held mine, the amber depths filled with an emotion I was afraid to name, that you are my true mate, the one the moon goddess intended for me from the beginning. The words hung between us, heavy with significance. In our world, true mates were rare, a sacred bond that transcended the political alliances and arranged pairings that were common among pack leadership. If what he was saying was true, how can you be sure? I asked, my voice barely audible. We've barely spoken before yesterday. I've known since the first time I scented you at the spring gathering 3 years ago, he said simply. But you were young, still finding your place in the world. I needed to wait, to be certain that when I claimed you, you would be ready to stand beside me not just as my mate but as Luna. I remembered that gathering, a celebration of the spring equinox when the entire pack had gathered for a feast and bonfire. I had served food that night, moving among the tables with my head down, trying to attract as little attention as possible. I had no memory of coming close enough to the alpha for him to catch my scent, but apparently I had. But my shifting, I began, unable to let go of the concern that had defined my entire existence. Is irrelevant to the bond between us, he interrupted firmly. The ability to shift has nothing to do with one's worth as a mate or as Luna. Some of our greatest alphas in history were paired with Lunas who had unique shifting abilities or challenges. I've never heard those stories, I said, frowning. Because they've been deliberately suppressed, he said, a hint of anger coloring his tone. The previous generation of leaders, my father included, believed that strength was measured only in combat prowess and shifting ability. They erased the histories that contradicted their narrow vision of power. He took my hands in his touch gentle but firm. But that's not the pack I want to lead, Lyra. I want to build a community that values all forms of strength, healing, compassion, intelligence, loyalty. And I need a Luna who embodies those qualities to help me reshape our future. The conviction in his voice, the unwavering certainty in his eyes, was beginning to chip away at the walls I had built around my heart. Could this be real? Could the Alpha, could Nathaniel, truly see value in me that no one else had recognized? There will be resistance, I said, thinking of Kira's furious expression at the ceremony. Challenges to your authority, perhaps even to your leadership. A dangerous smile curved his lips, reminding me that for all his gentle words, the man before me was still the most dominant predator in our territory. Let them try, he said softly. I've been waiting for an excuse to clear out some of the more problematic elements of our pack hierarchy. A shiver ran through me at his words. Not of fear, but of something else entirely. Something primal and instinctive that recognized and responded to the power he wielded with such casual confidence. And what if I'm not ready? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. What if I need time to adjust to this new reality before completing the mating bond? His expression softened immediately. Then we wait, he said simply. The ceremonial aspects of our mating are complete. You are officially Luna of the Silvercrest Pack. The physical bond can wait until you're ready. Relief and something like disappointment warred within me at his easy acceptance. And you would be patient, even though tradition dictates the bond should be completed immediately? I've waited 3 years to claim you as mine, he said, his voice dropping to a rumble that sent heat spiraling through me. I can wait a little longer for you to claim me as yours. The implication in his words, that this was a mutual choosing, that I had power in this relationship, was so foreign to my understanding of pack dynamics that for a moment I couldn't process it. Alphas took. They didn't ask. Alphas commanded. They didn't wait for permission. Yet here was Nathaniel Thorne, the most powerful alpha our territory had seen in generations, treating me as an equal partner in this decision. I don't know how to be Luna, I confessed, voicing my deepest fear. I haven't been trained for it like Kira and the others. I don't know the protocols, the responsibilities. You know how to care for others, he interrupted gently. You know how to listen, how to heal, how to show compassion even to those who have treated you poorly. The rest, the protocols, the ceremonies, those can be taught. The qualities that make a true Luna come from within, and those you already possess in abundance. He lifted one of my hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent a jolt of warmth through my entire body. You won't be alone in this, Lyra. I will be beside you every step of the way. As if in response to his words, a commotion arose outside the Alpha's quarters, raised voices, the sound of multiple footsteps approaching. Nathaniel's expression darkened as he rose from the bed, positioning himself between me and the door in a protective stance that spoke volumes about his instincts where I was concerned. The door burst open without a knock, a breach of protocol so severe that I gasped audibly. Kira stood in the doorway, her beautiful face contorted with rage, flanked by her father and 2 other high-ranking warriors. This has gone far enough, Nathaniel, her father Damon said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. The pack will not accept this mockery of our sacred traditions. Nathaniel's posture shifted subtly, his body language communicating a deadly warning that the intruders either didn't notice or chose to ignore. You forget yourself, Damon, he said, his voice deceptively calm. "This is my private chamber, and you enter without permission or invitation." "Because you leave us no choice," Kira spat, her amber eyes fixing on me with such hatred that I flinched involuntarily. "You would make that broken creature our Luna. She can't even shift properly. She'll bear weak pups, dilute our bloodline, make us the laughingstock of all the surrounding territories." I should have been hurt by her words, and part of me was. But something else was rising within me. Anger. Not just for myself, but for all those who had been judged and found wanting based on narrow definitions of worth and strength. Before Nathaniel could respond, I rose from the bed, moving to stand beside him rather than behind him. "My shifting ability has nothing to do with my worth as Luna," I said, my voice steadier than I had expected. "And if you believe otherwise, perhaps you're the one who doesn't understand our pack's true history and traditions." Kira's eyes widened in shock. Clearly, she had expected me to cower, to hide behind the Alpha's protection. Her father looked equally stunned, though the warriors flanking him shifted uncomfortably, perhaps sensing that this confrontation was not going as planned. "You dare speak to me that way?" Kira hissed. "You, who have been nothing but a burden to this pack for your entire life?" I felt Nathaniel tense beside me, felt the growl building in his chest, but I placed a gentle hand on his arm. This was my fight, perhaps the first of many I would face as Luna, and I needed to stand my ground. "I have served this pack in ways you've never noticed or valued," I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I've tended your wounds, taught your children, supported your elders. I may not be a warrior like you, Kira, but healing takes its own kind of strength, one our pack desperately needs after years of focusing solely on combat prowess and political power." Damon stepped forward, his expression darkening. "You speak of things you don't understand, girl. The Alpha needs a strong mate, one who can—" "The Alpha has chosen," Nathaniel cut in, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. "And the pack will respect that choice, or they are welcome to seek their fortunes elsewhere." The threat hung in the air between them, clear, unambiguous, and backed by the kind of power that could enforce it without question. Damon hesitated, glancing at his daughter, whose face had gone pale with the realization that this battle was already lost. "You would choose her over the stability of the pack?" he asked, a last desperate attempt to sway the Alpha's decision. Nathaniel's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own in a gesture that was both possessive and supportive. "I have chosen her precisely for the stability and future of the pack," he said firmly. "A future that values all kinds of strength, not just the ability to fight or shift. A future where healing and compassion are recognized as essential qualities for our community's survival." He stepped forward, still holding my hand, his presence so commanding that Damon and the warriors automatically backed away. "Now, you will leave our quarters. You will show proper respect to your Luna from this moment forward, and if I ever hear you or anyone else in this pack refer to her as broken or defective again, you will find yourself without a home or a pack before the words have fully left your lips. Am I understood?" The threat in his voice was unmistakable, and even Kira, proud, beautiful Kira, who had never backed down from anything in her life, lowered her eyes in submission. "Yes, Alpha," Damon said stiffly, gesturing for the others to retreat. As they filed out, Kira's eyes met mine one last time. There was still hatred there, still resentment, but beneath it I saw something else. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. She had built her entire identity around becoming Luna someday, around being the strongest and most perfect female in the pack. Without that future to cling to, who was she? In that moment, I felt an unexpected pang of compassion for her. "Kira," I called softly as she turned to leave. She paused, her back stiffening. "Your strength is still valuable to the pack. I hope you'll choose to use it to protect our people, not to fight against a decision that's already been made." She didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge that I had spoken. But something in the set of her shoulders told me she had heard me. Whether my words would make any difference remained to be seen. As the door closed behind them, I let out a shaky breath, my knees suddenly weak with the aftermath of confrontation. Nathaniel's arm slipped around my waist, supporting me without making it obvious that I needed the support. "That," he said quietly, is exactly why I chose you as my Luna. I looked up at him, confused. Because I can face down Kira without crying? He laughed softly, the sound warming something deep inside me. Because even when faced with someone who has been cruel to you for years, your instinct is still to offer understanding and a path to reconciliation. You don't seek to crush your opponents, Lyra. You seek to transform them into allies. His words settled over me like a mantle. Not a burden, but a purpose. A vision of what I could be, what we could build together. Do you really think it's possible? I asked. To change the pack's values so fundamentally? Not overnight, he admitted, leading me to a small sitting area near the fireplace. But yes, I believe it's possible. Necessary, even. Our pack has been stagnating under the old ways, becoming more isolated, more rigid in our thinking. We need to evolve if we're to survive in a changing world. As we sat together before the crackling fire, his arm still around me, I felt a strange sense of rightness. As if pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was solving were finally falling into place. The pack's weakest member becoming its Luna. The outcast finding herself at the center. The broken one being valued precisely for the ways in which her brokenness had shaped her compassion and resilience. I'm still afraid, I confessed, resting my head against his shoulder, afraid I'll fail you, fail the pack. Afraid I won't be strong enough to face the challenges ahead. Nathaniel's hand came up to stroke my hair, the gesture so tender that it nearly brought tears to my eyes. Do you remember what you did last night, during the ceremony? He asked. I groaned softly, embarrassment washing over me again. Fell asleep on your shoulder, mortifying myself in front of the entire pack? He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest against my ear. You trusted me enough to be completely vulnerable in my presence, even surrounded by those who had judged and rejected you for years. That, Lyra, is true strength. The courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to open yourself to possibility despite past wounds. His fingers found my mother's pendant, tracing the outline of the crescent moon that had been my talisman for so long. Your mother once told me something that I've never forgotten, he said softly. She said that true power isn't found in domination, but in protection. Not in how much harm you can inflict, but in how much healing you can offer. I lifted my head to look at him, surprised. You knew my mother well enough for her to share such thoughts with you? A sad smile touched his lips. I was young, just 15 when she died, but she had been kind to me during a difficult time after my mother left the pack. She saw beyond my bloodline and rank to the confused, angry boy beneath. In many ways, you remind me of her. The same quiet strength, the same compassion. He cupped my face in his large hand, his amber eyes holding mine with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. I didn't choose you because of her, or despite your shifting ability, or for any political calculation. I chose you because you, Lyra Blackwood, are exactly the mate I need, the one who will balance me, challenge me, and help me build the kind of pack our people deserve. In that moment, with the firelight casting golden shadows across his face and his words wrapping around me like a protective embrace, I finally began to believe, not just in his choice but in myself, in my value, in my strength, in my right to stand beside him as an equal partner. I reached up, my fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, marveling at my own boldness. And if I said I was ready now, I whispered, ready to complete the bond, to truly become your Luna in every sense? His eyes darkened, pupils dilating as his body tensed beside mine. Are you certain? He asked, his voice dropping to a growl that sent shivers down my spine. There's no rush, Lyra. I meant what I said about waiting until you're ready. In answer, I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his. Tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as he responded with a hunger that matched the awakening desire within me. His arms tightened around me, pulling me onto his lap as the kiss deepened, becoming something primal and transformative. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, I rested my forehead against his. I've spent my entire life waiting, I said softly. Waiting to be seen, waiting to find my place, waiting to belong. I don't want to wait anymore, Nathaniel. I want to start living as your Luna, as your mate, as your partner in creating the future we both envision. The smile that spread across his face was like the sun breaking through clouds, warm, brilliant, and full of promise. "Then, let us begin," he said, rising with me still in his arms and carrying me toward the bed that would now be ours. "Let us begin our future together, Luna Lyra of the Silvercrest Pack." As he laid me gently on the furs, his body following mine down, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with physical desire, and everything to do with finding, at last, the place where I truly belonged. Not as the broken wolf, the pack's burden, the girl who couldn't shift properly, but as Luna, as healer, as the woman strong enough to fall asleep in the Alpha's arms before the entire pack. My mother's pendant gleamed in the firelight between us, the silver crescent a symbol not of what I had lost, but of what I had found, a new beginning, a crescent moon promising the fullness to come. And as Nathaniel's lips found mine again, as our bodies and souls began the ancient dance that would bind us together as true mates, I knew with absolute certainty that I had finally come home,